The very first computers seemed as big as houses and so mysterious that for most of us, the computer was behind a closed door. But IBM was thinking how to make the computer more useful. And as one good idea led to another, it began getting smaller, faster, less expensive, and easier to use. Today, a new IBM computer has reached a personal scale. A person can afford it. A person can put it anywhere. Office, home, or school.
What's the capital of Nebraska? Come on.
Atari home computers can teach you or reach you with important information anytime, day or night.
I already checked the computer the bear's lost.
I'm here with an average American homemaker with her own Apple personal computer. Jill, do you use your Apple for household budgeting?
Actually, I'm working in gold futures.
Oh, well, you could probably put a lot of recipes in there, huh?
Mm-hmm. And you can do trend analyses, generate bar graphs.
Are you really a homemaker?
Of course.
So Apple is the appliance of the 80s for all those pesky household chores.
I also own a small steel mill.
The first reliable computer was built by an American about 50 years ago. Since then, computers have multiplied like fury, and they've also become far more reliable. And more Americans rely on them.
The personal computer. It is becoming so commonplace that many of us are becoming dependent on it.
I mean, how many calculators do you own?
2, maybe?
Right. And you have to use the automatic bank telling machines?
Sure.
So life is already seducing you into learning this stuff. It's not going to happen at once, and it's certainly not an 1984-ish vision at all. It's just going to be very gradual and very human, and will seduce you into learning how to use it.
Kraftwerk means electrical energy or electrical power plant.
Now, in 1972, here in the UK, we saw the first album from Kraftwerk, which is simply called Kraftwerk. Obviously, at that time, you were one of the first electronic-sounding bands. Now, surely some of the equipment that you were using at that time must be pretty dated now. I wonder if you could tell us how much new equipment you have developed since Kraftwerk has been in existence.
Well, the most important thing for us was always the rhythms, because we had already, Florian had a pickup and so he played like because we came initially from semi-classical music, because we were trained in that field, German classical music, and so Florian used to have a flute with attached pickups, feedback and echo chambers and all this stuff, and I came from piano, so I had, of course, obviously an electronic organ and also oscillators and pickup microphones and all kinds. And then we produced a lot of sounds with tapes. The biggest problem we always had was with drummers, because they were very much into the whole physical thing of gymnastics, you know. So we changed. I think every drummer who came to play with us from the area where we live, we had about 20 different, and they wouldn't stay with us because we asked them to electrify, you know, to get away from this physical thing into electrical sound. They wouldn't do it, so one day we found ourselves standing there on our own, just the two of us, Ralph, Florian, and I just happened to have an old rhythm box machine. So we started recording with that in 1971, and from that day on there was no turning back. And we then, when Wolfgang came in, he was the first to really be open enough to play, and by that time we had developed either the rhythm box playing automatically, or you could, we had attached a special system so that you could also play manually by closing circuits, electric circuits, and trigger off the electronic noises. And I think Wolfgang was the first, just came in and was open enough to play that stuff, because the other drummers wouldn't touch that time, you know. It was a big taboo about, just drummers seemed to be very, at that time seemed to be very reactionary, very much orientated towards, you know, historical things with big drum sets and all kinds of hide themselves behind. And this electronic machinery, this special drum beat, I think has then been like a specialty maybe with us that we have developed over the years. Now we have the whole group is synchronized. Now we can always synchronize ourselves into the rhythms, so we can either play it automatic or change the programs while they are running.
myself into the future. welcome to another installment in my classic album deep dive series. Today I'm going to be talking about the 8th studio album by Kraftwerk. Now, who was Kraftwerk? Kraftwerk was pretty much the brainchild of Ralph Hutter and Florian Schneider all the way back to 1970. They formed the band Kraftwerk, which was part of the burgeoning krautrock scene, where you had German bands who were incorporating elements of psychedelic rock, avant-garde, and electronic music into a pretty revolutionary style of music. And Kraftwerk would eventually abandon some of the more organic instruments used in krautrock, like guitars, organic drums, flutes, which were processed in kind of an electronic way. And they would evolve over the course of the 1970s into one of the most influential electronic and synth pop bands of all time. They influenced a host of 80s new wave synth pop bands, all the way from Pet Shop Boys to OMD to Human League, Soft Cell, Depeche Mode. They were all influenced to one degree or another by Kraftwerk. And Computer World was their first album of the 1980s, and it definitely laid the template for a lot of the synth pop electronic music that we got the rest of the decade. New Order and their single Blue Monday comes to mind as one of the most direct Kraftwerk kind of ripoffs, I guess. And I don't want to say ripoff, but basically they took the Kraftwerk sound and made it their own. Now, over the course of the 70s, like I say, Kraftwerk sound evolved. One of the first albums that really defined Kraftwerk was 1974's Autobahn. They went on to release Trans-Europe Express, which some people regard as their masterpiece. The Man Machine, which incorporated more dance rhythms into their sound. And in 1981, they released this album, Computer World. And it seems a little bit odd now, particularly if you were not of that generation, to have as a concept album the idea that computers are taking over the world. They're pushing their way into society, every facet of our lives. Computers were beginning to intrude on, because we take it for granted now. Everything is computerized. You don't go 5 minutes without having some sort of interface with an electronic device or a computer or a smartphone or another piece of technology. But back in 1981, this was all very new. People who had never touched a computer before were learning about computer technology. You were starting to see a lot of home computer systems which were being marketed in the early 80s. And that's really what this album is about. What does it mean now that computers, everybody is starting to get exposed to computers? What does that mean for communication and relationships, how we interact with each other, how we interact with the world around us? How are all those things influenced by the coming computer age? If you were around back then, you can probably remember how exciting those times were, how new and fresh all of this seemed. And it's captured in some of the songs here, like Pocket Calculator, which is really one of the first handheld electronic devices. There's a song about computer dating, which must have seemed outlandish. A song like Home Computer addresses the fact that computers were now more compact, more affordable. They were popping up in more households. So yeah, this is an album very much of its time. And Kraftwerk's music has always been forward-thinking. It's always been innovative. There were a small handful of bands who were putting out music which was entirely made by keyboards and electronic technology. There were no organic drums, no guitars, no bass, nothing like what you would see in a traditional pop song. And to have an entire album of this was pretty unique even for 1981. And Kraftwerk's image was the antithesis of the rock and roll or the pop star. They all looked like mannequins wearing matching suits. Much of the vocals on their records were processed through a vocoder. It was difficult to tell any of them apart. They were almost like characters out of George Orwell's 1984, but it was definitely in keeping with the futuristic style of the music. So anyway, let's get into the songs on Computer World. The album starts off with the title track, Computer World, and honestly, to listen to this today, I'm sure there are people who are going to be, what's the big deal? But I say the same thing that I say when talking about Pet Sounds or Sgt. Pepper or Dark Side of the Moon. You had to have been there to understand why this was so groundbreaking. You have this electronic rhythm, the synthesizer melody. It really sounded something straight out of a computer game. And unless you were familiar with Kraftwerk's previous work, it probably was a bit of an eye-opener for most people who happened to stumble across this record. The lyrics themselves sound somewhat abstract. You have Interpol, Deutsche Bank, FBI, Scotland Yard. Presumably, these are all institutions who have already embraced the computer technology. But you also have business, numbers, money, people, communication, entertainment. It almost sounds like some kind of Mission Impossible recording, but it all works together beautifully, and it's a really intoxicating lead-off track. The next track is Pocket Calculator, and to take you back, probably in the early 80s, a pocket calculator was the first piece of technology that most of us were exposed to or at least owned at some point. I never owned a pocket calculator that made any noise. The lyrics of this song talk about composing a melody on your calculator, which I never had one that could do that, but I presume the earliest calculators made some type of noise or tone when you touch the keyboards, kind of like those old push-button phones. But anyway, it's a bouncy synth melody, very bright and upbeat. And if you can get past the dated nature of the lyrics, it's a really fun tune to listen to. Track Numbers has the heaviest percussion of any song on the album. There's a frenetic pulsating synth rhythm, and there's a voice that seems to be reciting numbers in different languages through a vocoder. It's an interesting song, and it definitely propels the album forward. World 2 is a reprise or a companion to track 1, which was the original Computer World. The Computer World theme is recycled again. It's taken at a little bit of a faster clip, but then by the end, it totally is deconstructed. It devolves into these moody synth textures. And there's a vocal at the end that's processed through a vocoder again, but I have no idea what they're saying, what language they're speaking. The effect is a little unsettling, I have to say, at the end of this song. It's a little claustrophobic. Side 2 opens up with Computer Love, and this is a song about basically what would come to be known as online dating. But back then, it was very hard to imagine anything like online dating or dating via a computer. So probably when most people heard this for the first time, it seemed kind of a preposterous idea. But now in hindsight, we can say, yeah, that was eventually going to become a thing. So much like the Back to the Future movies, you have these concepts that seem very futuristic, especially for the times. But it's kind of cool to think that they could conceptualize a world where this would actually happen. The next track, Home Computer, is where Kraftwerk really flex their synthesizer muscles on this record. There is so many interesting things going on in this song. Yeah, it's an instrumental, but it is very cool. I love all the synthesizer electronic effects in this song. Almost sounds like the soundtrack to an early arcade video game, but I love it. The last track on the album is It's More Fun to Compute, and it borrows some of the themes from the song Home Computer, but some more interesting synthesizer textures. The rhythm and the beat is bouncy, but the washes of synthesizer are a little bit dark, a little bit moody, but like all good instrumentals, it holds your attention. And listening to this, I hear a lot of Thomas Dolby. I mean, name any of your favorite synth pop artists or bands. They all borrowed heavily from Kraftwerk. And this is really a lot of the source material for synth pop in the 1980s, as I've said before. And yes, of course, there is a German language version of the album. I should probably say it's the original version of the album since they are German. But it's the exact same instrumental backing, but they're all German language with the exception of It's More Fun to Compute, which is actually listed on here in English. But you have Computerwelt, Taschen, Rechner, Nummern, Computerwelt 2, Computerliebe, Heimcomputer. I'm probably butchering the pronunciations of these. But anyway, it's cool. I got both versions of it just because I'm a sick completist. But anyway, what a great album Computer World is. But I know it's not probably Kraftwerk's best album, but for me, it's my go-to Kraftwerk album. I love it. Let me know what you think of Computer World. Where does it rank for you in Kraftwerk's discography? Let me know what you think if you haven't heard it before, if this is your first time listening to it. Thanks again for watching. Hope you're doing great, and take care.